We talked about earlier in the program, as has been anticipated for a couple of weeks now since it was telegraphed. The big guy announced path to citizenship for about 500,000 migrants who entered this country illegally but are now married to U.S. citizens. Anyone who has lived in the country for 10 years as of Monday of this week is married to an American and poses no security or criminal threat. They will be shielded from deportation, provided work permits, 3 years to apply for citizenship, and that also includes their kids. Some 50,000 children of these spouses will also be eligible. It's DACA deja vu. I guess if it was good in Joe Obama term 2, it's even better in Joe Obama term 3. The constitutionality or legality of this parole in place per the federal statute is dubious, to say the least, so expect it to be litigated. But there's 500,000 votes, and I'm not talking about the migrants, but their spouses
Right.
that, they're American citizen spouses that can legally vote that Biden just tried to buy off, maybe did buy off.
It's all about the Hispanic vote yesterday. That's all that was.
So here's the thing. It's not all about the Latino vote. No. It's because that's not the base of the party. The base of the party is wealthy leftist honkies in the suburbs. And they are all about the sentimental policy making. So it's in part them, and it's in part an eye towards a future reimagined electorate. The issue here, though, is what exactly is the Republican Party doing in preparation for the potential impact of the untold millions of people who have been invited to enter this country illegally and stay? And we talked about this at the beginning of the year. In fact, it was a memo by well-respected election attorney Cleta Mitchell that really prompted the conversation. She pointed to two particular vulnerabilities. One is the National Voter Registration Act in combination with Supreme Court precedents on that statute, along with state-level voter registration infrastructure, that while, federal law prohibits non-citizens from voting in federal elections, then there's the actual enforcement of said law. From Cleta Mitchell's memo, the Supreme Court ruled that states may not require documentary proof of citizenship in order to vote in a federal election, citing the National Voter Registration Act. That states must accept the federal registration form, voter registration form, for purposes of registering to vote, and there's no language in the National Voter Registration Act to require such documentation. Accordingly, the only protection against illegals voting is a signature attestation that the person registering is a citizen, which the Supreme Court has deemed sufficient. The Biden administration has ordered every federal agency to register everyone who comes into contact with the agency. So what protections exist to stop the registration of migrants by the Department of Homeland Security? There are myriad left-wing advocacy groups who register illegals to vote. So that's Cleta Mitchell. That's one source of the problem. She goes on to say many states, such as North Carolina and Wisconsin, allow the use of student IDs for voting purposes. Foreign students are issued IDs, thus creating yet another potential pool of illegal voting. And then lastly, the federal statute governing overseas and military voting also does not require proof of citizenship in order to register and cast a vote from overseas. The Uniformed and Overseas Citizen Absentee Voting Act allows persons to essentially register and vote by email without a residence in the United States and without any proof of citizenship. It was intended to facilitate military personnel and families in their voting while deployed. However, in 2020, that vote was 63% civilian. The failure to require proof of citizenship creates yet another pool of potential non-citizen voting. This is all the work of Cleta Mitchell that I'm citing. So what are House Republicans doing to ensure, as best as they can, that these pools of potential illegal voters do not swim to the surface between now and November 5th, or when early voting begins in November 5th? For more on this, we're pleased to be joined by Wisconsin Republican Representative Bryan Steil, just across the cheddar curtain there in Kenosha. Bryan, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on.
All right, so you know the arguments. I'm sure you're familiar with Cleta Mitchell's concerns. What are we doing to address them?
Yeah, I've talked to Cleta Mitchell a number of times. There's two parallel things that we need to be doing. One, setting forward the policies to actually unwind exactly what we're talking about. So the House is likely to bring up the SAVE Act next week, which actually requires proof of citizenship at the point where you register to vote. That'd be a big step to make sure that only U.S. citizens are participating in U.S. elections, in direct contrast to what the Democrats want in places where they've implemented it, like our nation's capital in Washington, D.C., where non citizens are currently, under current law, legally eligible to vote, in particular in municipal elections for things like city council. Just to tell you how crazy that is, that means that a individual working, say, at the Russian embassy, residing in Washington, D.C. for only 30 days, is eligible to vote in our nation's capital. I think U.S. citizens should be the only ones who are voting in U.S. elections. Getting that law passed, the SAVE Act, is going to be tough because Biden, of course, is going to say no. So then the question should be, well, what are we going to do if we get blocked by Biden on reforming and changing these laws? That then is actually going after the administrative state. And Biden put forward an executive order that really worked to try to weaponize all of our federal agencies to drive forward a get out the vote effort with a partisan purpose. I have subpoenaed all 15 cabinet secretaries that are involved in this, demanding they provide their strategic plan. And when we get that, if we're able to show, which I think we will, that they're acting with a partisan purpose, we can then go to the courts and get an injunction and block the work of what the Biden administration is doing. It's a fight to get their strategic plan, and that's why I subpoenaed those cabinet secretaries.
What about any evidence or anything you've heard that there may be evidence, as Cleta Mitchell suggested, that you have third-party advocacy groups registering illegal immigrants to vote? You have potentially agencies that are interacting with illegal immigrants, and they could be, we don't know, I don't know, they could be registering them to vote. What about just sort of the exposing anything like that may be going on? That may be more fruitful than trying to move legislation, given the timeline.
Yeah, you're spot on. We held a hearing. I held a hearing on this on my committee that I chair, the Committee on House Administration, and we brought in experts on this exact topic. And what we saw is that non-citizens, both legal and illegal, but non-citizens, were on the voter rolls in states like Ohio, where they had to be removed. We had instances and problems in places like Pennsylvania, where they labeled it a glitch. And in Washington, D.C., non-citizens are legally eligible to vote in municipal elections. And so we're calling this out to make sure people understand the risk that we have inside of our system, which lacks the proper checks to make sure that U.S. elections are only for U.S. citizens.
Well, will we be fine November 5th? Is it going to, your efforts, are they going to be completed by then?
I mean, this is going to be a game of whack-a-mole with the Democrats, unfortunately. But this is where we have to use every tool in the toolkit to secure this election, to make sure people have confidence in it, that there is integrity in the upcoming election. Every state is going to be at some level a little bit different in this situation. And that's where in places like Wisconsin, we're working aggressively to make sure that our voter rolls are prepared for this November's election so that President Trump can be elected president of the United States. But it's going to be an all of the above approach, working at the state level and the federal level, and ultimately at the end of the day, policy changes to actually get the laws right on the books.
Well, I appreciate what you're doing and your focus on Wisconsin, not just because you represent there, but also because it's an important swing state. So this is not a one-man job. And when we were talking about this a bit earlier in the wake of what Biden did yesterday, the point we were discussing is there enough attention being paid to this by the RNC, by the Trump campaign, and to the extent that you feel like you're not going to be able to close all of the open doors, to make this public, what the Republican Party and the Trump campaign is actually doing, the sort of manpower they have, the understanding they have of where the vulnerabilities are. So at least you send a message to anybody that would be planning any sort of election skullduggery that there's a good chance you'll get caught if you do something that runs afoul of the law, and we're going to hammer people who do something that runs afoul of the law, just to at least try to attempt to have a chilling effect in addition to whatever else you can do with a ballot integrity program.
Chairman Watley of the RNC, Laura Trump, the two co-chairs of the RNC, and President Trump are laser focused on this. I was with President Trump yesterday at the rally in Racine, and before he went on, he and I spoke about my work on this exact topic. He is laser focused on this to make sure that we have an election that has the integrity that we need so people have confidence in it. And so the RNC is running a robust operation. We are aggressive on this. We're working hand in glove. But like you said, it's making sure every door is closed, shining a light on it. That's where programs like yours is so important, to get the word out about the work that we're doing, because at the end of the day, we're going to have to hold people accountable if they abuse the system.
Bryan Steil is a Republican congressman from Wisconsin's 1st Congressional District, the greater Kenosha area. Bryan, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
There's only one radio show in Chicago talking about today's biggest stories and telling you what they really mean. That show is this one, Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560, The Answer.
Balance of Nature's fruits and veggies supplements, changing the world one life at a time.
I work for the New York City Fire Department. I've been using Balance of Nature for 8 years, I believe. It's been phenomenal. And I just got retired after 33 years. I work long hours, a lot of overtime. I teach at the Fire Academy. I run with the mornings. I work out all the time. And your product has been so successful for me in my regimen. I have nothing